This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Joining me now, John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. If you hear any dinging in the background, that's my roommate's phone going off. She's not answering it. So, do you hear it? Or...
I do. I just thought that this was maybe some theme music, Mr. Sandman or something, you know.
It could be. We could use it henceforth if you'd like for that reason.
Well, let's try not to put people to sleep today, okay?
All right.
Let's talk about former President Donald Trump is handed a 37-count indictment. This looks pretty serious to me. Before we talk about reaction, before we talk about anything, we'll just talk about the indictment itself. How major is this? And do you think this presents significant legal troubles for him of a magnitude we have not seen for a former president?
Yes, as you may remember, I thought the New York state court indictment was just ridiculous. And I still think that. And at the time I said real indictments are going to happen, will come later here and in Georgia. We don't know yet about Georgia, but this thing is, I mean, if you read the indictment, it's lengthy, it's detailed, it's a narrative, and some things seem not disputed. He absconded with files he knew were classified. He had some moved when the federal people were coming. He knew details about what was in one to the point that he was bragging about it to some visitors while admitting it was classified and that he couldn't show it to them. And he misstated or misrepresented what he had, all for reasons that are not clear, other than that he's just Trump and he wanted to have them and he wanted to show off. Maybe I don't know, but I'm not prepared to say. But all of that is, and then he talked with his lawyers, according to some notes, about how to conceal that he had some of these. I mean, you know, that appears to be a criminal activity. It's certainly irregular, illegal activity. And it's not that he had the files, which is bad, but others have had files, which we'll talk about. It's the actions taken after, sort of in line with the old Watergate cliche. It's not the crime, it's the cover-up. And that's what we got here. This is, Politico reports that South Florida juries, federal juries, are notorious for acquitting public officials, local level, who are indicted. I'm not saying there will be a conviction. I'm saying a grand jury was persuaded, and I understand why they were persuaded. And this is for real, whereas some of the others have just been silly, in my opinion.
So let's talk about Republican reaction to this. Democrats have been somewhat muted, quite frankly. You haven't heard a lot of crowing on that side. I mean, you have from some political pundits, but you have not from a lot of elected officials. I think they say let the justice system play out. But Jim Jordan, Lindsey Graham go on the Sunday news shows yesterday and really offer a spirited defense that former President Trump had every right to do exactly what he did. I mean, we're talking about some serious national security papers that were carelessly concealed, perhaps shared with who knows who, and definitely some of the things that you've outlined in the indictment would point to illegal activity. Why is this rally the wagons around President Trump when I think some of those more serious-minded, particularly Lindsey Graham, knows that this is a serious offense?
Well, I think it's sadly the state of our politics, and I think Graham and Jordan on the Sunday talk shows may have been, who knows, but until that point, and I had written a draft of a column at that point that's only been modestly changed since, that the prevailing conservative reaction has been, yeah, so what? What about Hillary? What about Hunter Biden? What about Joe Biden? And I think those two guys maybe made a conscious decision, or maybe it's just their instinct. We better get out here and say somebody needs to say he didn't do anything wrong. this defense of whataboutism is good for the base, but we've got a bigger problem. Maybe that was the factor, but they certainly both made the point. Jordan very combatively, as which is redundant, that well, you saw it with Dana Bash. He said the president can declassify anything he wants, and he did all this, and everything he took was declassified by him, and nothing wrong with it. I don't think you'll get a prevailing public view that there's nothing wrong with it. I think the more effective.
Even Trump admits that he knew he had information that wasn't declassified.
That's what she was telling Jordan. That what you're saying doesn't make sense. It's in his own words. He knew that these weren't classified. They were classified because he said they were. You know that kind of thing. I'm not sure that's very effective, but it is another layer of the partisan defense. After all, he is the very nearly the presumptive nominee based on what the polls show now. All of that we hope can change, or one might hope can change. But that may be what they're trying to do: layers of explanation or defense.
Yeah, and the defense of this is a weaponization of the Department of Justice is another defense that you saw throughout there too. And again, I mean, it just kind of begs the question: is there any illegal activity that we can avoid putting in a partisan camp? I mean, particularly when it's something as, to me, as important as critical as national security issues. I mean, there were plans for potential military moves. That it sounds like that there were, assets, people who are acting as informants for the U.S. government in some of these documents. There's a lot of pretty sensitive material in here.
And they're saying, but Hunter Biden. Well, Hunter Biden's not a government official, and as far as I'm concerned, you can put him under a jail somewhere for all I care. Yeah, but Joe Biden had documents. Yes, and he instantly had them retrieved by the authorities. His lawyer said, come in and look around for more. He didn't cover anything up, so far as we know, and he didn't jeopardize any of it, so far as we know. The one point they have that I find decent is that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, because of the zone of privacy she always insisted she ought to have as a public official, had her emails taken off a government server and put on a home server. And an audit showed there were some top secret things labeled top secret in there, not many. And the FBI investigated, and James Comey hurt her more politically than an indictment would have by saying she was reckless. This was handled recklessly, but we're not going to charge her because we don't see criminal intent, which enraged the right. And they don't want to hurt a man politically or hurt a candidate politically if you're politically motivated. Accuse them of being reckless, spare them on what looks like a partisan basis, and then after early voting starts in most states, announce you found a whole bunch more emails and there's a whole new suspicion on her. See, this idea that the Democrats are going after Trump in this case to just hurt him for political reasons strikes me as utterly absurd. There's political risk. You lose this case before a jury, there's political risk. You've emboldened Trump already with this base. You've emboldened him with fundraising. Now, if he gets an acquittal down there, if you can't deliver, then you've harmed yourself politically. Hillary got the greater political harm. She got home detention as the defeated candidate for president. Essentially, that's what she got. So I'm not buying any of that, although I will admit, and not grudgingly, I think it's so. The best argument of whataboutism, to the extent that it is a good argument at all, is comparing Hillary's email situation to this. But it's different. We don't know of her gathering people around and saying, hey, read this here. Listen to what I got here. This is classified. I can't. You don't have any of that. You don't have anything about moving. Well, you do have a purging of a lot of emails that she said was personal, which, of course, critics criticize. It's the best whataboutism, what about her defense they have, and I'm sure it has some effectiveness. But the politics, You don't persuade a grand jury, a citizen grand jury, to return an indictment against the former president because it's a Democratic convention doing it. It's regular citizens who are persuaded, and the prosecutor and the Justice Department who bring it have invited great political risks to their administration and themselves by doing so. I think they looked at all this, they kept uncovering information and said, we are left with no choice but to take this to the grand jury and seek an indictment, because this was covered up. We were lied to, and this posed risk to the country. And Asa Hutchinson told me in a text over the weekend, the issue is, even if he's acquitted, he was using federal government secrets for entertainment purposes at Mar-a-Lago. And does that commend him to get installed again as commander-in-chief? I don't know if Asa is ever going to get any traction, but I think that's a very good point.
Yeah. Apparently, former Governor Asa Hutchinson and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, the only two really high-profile Republicans out there criticizing the former president on this. All right, let's shift our attention to here in Arkansas. We got another monthly report on the Medicaid rolls. We're going through this disenrollment process where we are weeding off the people who were automatically put on the Medicaid rolls during the pandemic. This is a federal law requiring this and a state law requiring this. You've expressed some concerns that the feds are asking Arkansas to slow down a little bit. I could make a pretty convincing counter argument that, well, they got 6 months to get it done. They might better pick up the pace a little bit and make sure that they're going through everything that they're supposed to go through. What's your concern?
My concern is simply to repeat the concern of the federal official in the federal Medicaid department, whatever they call it, Centers for Medical Services, who initiated a conference call with Arkansas reporters to say, hey, we got to get all these people off who were expanded. We're giving states 12 months to do it. Arkansas is going at warp speed down there. Based on one renewal letter that didn't get sent back, or based on some information that was sent back that was incomplete. And we appreciate their effort. And we know they have a state law that the recent legislature passed saying get this done in 6 months. But we gave a year. It's implied we're 90% funders of this thing. We think it's risky. We think it's very likely to be catching a lot of people who really shouldn't be kicked off when you're kicking off with that speed, at that volume, on that basis. Now, this is where I get, Arkansas has a history of being stingy about Medicaid, even as it has a higher percentage than most states of Medicaid eligible people. Well, we see some fat guy out there buried up in a lumpy sofa watching TV and being able-bodied to the extent that he could ever get up off the couch and being on Medicaid, and we're paying for this guy and he's not doing anything. And he's out there, and the others who shouldn't be out there are getting Medicaid. The federal government is saying, wait, in 2 months you've thrown off 100,000, more than 100,000, based on initial attempts to verify. We appreciate your speed. In a way, we appreciate you got the issue of a law. The state sticking its nose into this, saying, "Well, you got to do it in 6 months when the feds give more." But we just would urge a little more caution. Don't be it. They're not saying, but it's to me, it's almost like they're saying, quit high-fiving about throwing out so many people off. You've got several more months to do this, and send another notice. And the state's going to say, we're doing everything we're supposed to. But there's a history, and it's of our stinginess, and it is significant and worthy of comment when the federal government says, hey, you're leading the nation in throwing people off. Could you slow down maybe just a little? That's sort of the story, seems to me.
Well, I feel like 2 points I'd like to raise on that. Number one, we have an Office of Medicaid Fraud. So, I mean, if there is fraud going on, and we have seen cases brought forward in Attorney General Leslie Rutledge's administration, and predict that we will see some under Tim Griffin and under Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. The other thing, too, is I was on a rural health panel a few weeks ago, and I thought one of the most interesting things that was said, there were a lot of health hospital executives there. People are going to find out they are not Medicaid eligible anymore when they come into the emergency room for a visit. That's when the rubber's going to hit the road. And I'm wondering if the state could do something, or the feds, to make sure there's some sort of navigator process in those emergency rooms, so that's, to me, going to be the biggest point of contact if you're not connecting with them by a letter or phone call or however else you're trying to do that. I feel like that there's an opportunity there. There's not a lot of emergency rooms in the grand total of the state of Arkansas, but you could put enough of a population in there of people that knew what they were doing to navigate those people to the proper health insurance if they even qualified for some things. And I hope that legislators will look at doing something practical like that to perhaps address.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think it's a practical matter whether you emphasize that. That's where a lot of this will come to fore. But yeah, there are a lot of people out there. The cycles of poverty are such that some people who are impoverished don't even know they're on Medicaid, and they don't, and they recoil against official looking letters, and they don't know how to respond to them. That's just a fact. So you have to be very take a lot of state initiative to make sure when you're purging tens of thousands a week that you're being fair with a kind of due process about it. So that's what we can hope for.
All right. Well, it sounds like your background music has disappeared. So
apparently that was the alarm, which is not doing anyway. Don't get me started. I hope the viewers enjoyed the serenade.
Yes. Thank you so much. John Brummett with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Good to visit.